Well, as hundreds of mountain climbers and thrill seekers set out this season to scale the world's highest peak, Mount Everest, authorities confirmed that at least 6 died during one expedition.
Mount Everest, the crown jewel of the Himalayas, has been slapped with a shutdown order by U.S. authorities. That's right, the United States said nobody can climb it anymore. This is a huge surprise, and nobody knows exactly why. Was it something scary? Something weird? From the amazing first climb by Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay, to the tragic fates of many who have tried to reach the top, Mount Everest is full of mysterious and creepy events. Here are some of the most mysterious and creepy events on Mount Everest. The ghost of Hannelore Schmatz. Hannelore Schmatz was a German climber who tragically died on Mount Everest in 1979. Her story is one of the creepiest and most haunting tales from the mountain. She was part of an expedition that successfully reached the summit, but things took a deadly turn during the descent. Schmatz and her team were caught in bad weather and decided to bivouac, or make a temporary camp, high up on the mountain near the South Col. Unfortunately, at such high altitudes, this decision proved fatal. Schmatz succumbed to exhaustion and exposure, passing away while sitting down, her back against her backpack. What made her death particularly eerie was how her body remained in a highly visible spot on the mountain for years. Climbers who passed by would see her frozen in place, with her eyes open and her hair blowing in the wind. The sight of Schmatz's body became a psychological challenge for many climbers. Imagine pushing yourself to the limit in the harsh conditions of Everest, and then coming across this haunting figure. Efforts to recover her body were also tragic. A Nepalese climber, Sungdair Sherpa, lost his life during an attempt to bring her down. Over time, the weather and elements eventually moved Schmatz's body off the main trail, and it's no longer as prominent as it once was. The Rainbow Valley. The name Rainbow Valley sounds pretty, but the reality is quite grim. This place is called Rainbow Valley because of the many colorful down jackets and climbing gear of deceased climbers that are scattered across the landscape. At such high altitudes, the conditions are extreme, and many climbers have sadly lost their lives here. The Rainbow Valley lies in the death zone, an area above 8,000 meters, 26,247 feet, where the oxygen levels are so low that the human body can't survive for long. In this zone, climbers face extreme cold, high winds, and severe exhaustion, which can quickly become fatal. When climbers die in the death zone, their bodies often stay where they fell. It's too dangerous and difficult to bring them down. Over time, more and more climbers who have died in their brightly colored gear have turned this part of the mountain into a macabre, rainbow-like graveyard. The sight is both beautiful and haunting. For climbers making their way to the summit, passing through Rainbow Valley can be a very emotional experience. The Green Boots. Green Boots is one of the most well-known and haunting landmarks on Mount Everest. This nickname refers to the body of an Indian climber who tragically died on the mountain in 1996. He got his name from the bright green climbing boots he was wearing when he perished. His body, still clad in those distinctive green boots, remains visible on the main northeast ridge route, serving as a grim marker for climbers. Green Boots is believed to be Tsewang Paljor, a member of the ill-fated 1996 Indo-Tibetan Border Police expedition. He and his team were caught in a severe storm during their descent from the summit. Paljor became separated from his team and, exhausted and out of oxygen, sought shelter in a small limestone cave. Sadly, he didn't survive the night. For years, Green Boots Cave has been a chilling waypoint for climbers ascending the northeast route. It's located at an altitude of around 8,500 meters, 27,187 feet, deep within the death zone. David Sharp's death. David Sharp's death on Mount Everest in 2006 is one of the most controversial and tragic stories in the history of climbing. David Sharp was a British climber who attempted to summit Everest alone and without sufficient support, which is risky given the extreme conditions of the mountain. During his ascent, Sharp reached the summit, but faced severe problems on his descent. He became exhausted and ran out of oxygen in the death zone, an area above 8,000 meters, 26,247 feet, where the air is so thin that the human body cannot survive for long. Sharp took shelter in the same cave as Green Boots, but his condition deteriorated rapidly. What makes Sharp's story particularly tragic is that over 40 climbers passed by him as he sat, dying, without offering significant help. Some climbers reported seeing him in a state of severe distress, barely able to move or speak. However, many felt they couldn't help due to the severe conditions and the risk to their own lives. At such high altitudes, even the smallest effort can be incredibly exhausting, and carrying another person is almost impossible. Frank Smythe's spooky experience. In 1933, English climber Frank Smythe had a strange and eerie experience during his first attempt to summit Mount Everest. Smythe was alone at an incredibly high altitude of 8,565 meters, 28,100 feet, on Everest's North Ridge, when he saw something very unusual. He described seeing two curious objects floating in the sky. They looked like kite balloons, which are balloon-like objects used for weather observation. However, these objects were different. One seemed to have squat, underdeveloped wings, and the other had a protuberance that looked like a beak. They hovered motionless, but pulsated slowly, even more slowly than Smythe's own heartbeat. But that wasn't the only odd thing Smythe experienced. During his ascent, he claimed to feel a strong presence beside him, an unidentifiable force that seemed to be accompanying him. This presence felt so real that Smythe even took out a slice of Kendal mint cake from his pocket, intending to share it with this invisible companion. He genuinely believed this immaterial entity was real, which made the whole experience even spookier. Some people wonder if he saw apparitions or had a supernatural experience. Others think it might have been a case of high-altitude hallucinations, which are not uncommon on Everest due to the low oxygen levels and extreme conditions. There are also some who suggest he might have seen something extraterrestrial. The Yeti. The legend of the Yeti, often called the Abominable Snowman, is deeply rooted in the folklore of the Everest region. Local Nepali and Tibetan tribes have long told stories of a mysterious, bipedal and hairy creature that roams the mountainous areas, particularly at night. These tales have captured the imaginations of many and have led to numerous expeditions and investigations over the years. One of the earliest and most famous pieces of evidence came from Eric Shipton's 1951 Everest expedition. During this trip, enormous footprints were discovered at an altitude of 6,000 meters, 20,000 feet. The size and shape of these prints were unlike anything seen before, and fueled speculation about the Yeti's existence. Another intriguing piece of evidence is the so-called Yeti scalp, kept in Kumjung's monastery on the southern side of Everest. The monks there claim it belongs to the mythical creature, and it has been a point of fascination for both locals and visitors alike. In more recent times, the search for the Yeti took a scientific turn. In 2009, Joshua Gates and his team from the TV show Destination Truth conducted an expedition in the region. They discovered a series of large footprints, each measuring 33 centimeters, 13 inches, long, and 25 centimeters, 10 inches, across. Hair samples taken from these footprints were analyzed by a forensic expert. Surprisingly, the analyst found that the DNA sequence of the hair did not match any known species, suggesting it might belong to an unknown creature. Mallory and Irvine. When Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay reached the top of Mount Everest in 1953, many people celebrated. But some wondered if two English climbers, George Mallory and Sandy Irvine, had actually been the first to do it in 1924. Mallory and Irvine were last seen about 200 to 300 meters from the summit, but they never came back. This led to nearly 100 years of guessing if they made it to the top. In 1999, a team led by Conrad Anker found Mallory's body on Everest. His body was in good shape because of the cold, but it didn't provide clear answers. They hoped to find his camera, which might have photos to solve the mystery, but it was missing. Even though they didn't find the camera, there was one interesting clue. Mallory had told his wife, Ruth, and his climbing team that he would leave a picture of her at the summit. When they found his body, the picture wasn't there. Some people think this means he reached the top and left the picture there. The story of Mallory and Irvine is one of the biggest mysteries in climbing. Even without solid proof, many believe they might have been the first to climb Everest. The missing picture makes some think they succeeded, The Russians? Before Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay became famous for climbing Everest in 1953, there was a story about a Russian expedition in 1952. This team supposedly tried to climb Everest from the north route in Tibet. There were even news reports suggesting that they planned to put statues of Lenin and Stalin at the summit. The Russian team set up their final camp at around 8,000 meters to prepare for the last push to the top. However, they disappeared without a trace, and no one knows what happened to them. To make things more confusing, the Russians have always said that this 1952 expedition never happened. Despite their denials, there was a report by Yevgeny Gippenreiter in the Alpine Journal later that year, saying that a team of 35 people tried to climb the Northeast Ridge route. Also, the Sydney Morning Herald on April 21, 1952, talked about the team's chances on the mountain. Even with these reports, no one has found any evidence of the team members or their leaders. Their names remain unknown, and there are no records of their journey. The story of the 1952 Russian expedition adds to the many mysteries of Mount Everest. Did they really try to climb the mountain? Or is it just a legend? The truth is still unclear, but their tale remains part of the mountain's rich history. Weli Stek. In April 2017, famous climber Weli Stek, known as the Swiss Machine, died while preparing for a challenging climb. Stek planned to climb both Everest and the nearby Lhotse in one go, a feat no one had ever done before. Stek was like the Michael Jordan or Lionel Messi of mountaineering. So many people believed he could do it. He was known for setting speed records on tough climbs like the north face of the Eiger and the south face of Annapurna. He even won the Piolet d'Or, a top award in mountaineering, twice. Stek was not just fast, he was also incredibly skilled and comfortable on very difficult routes. This made his death even more shocking. Stek fell while climbing the Western CWM on Everest, a route he had climbed before. This route is part of the standard path many climbers use to reach the top of Everest. For someone of Stek's skill, this should have been a simple climb, just a training exercise for his bigger goal of climbing both Everest and Lhotse. Stek's death was met with disbelief by the international climbing community. People wondered how such a skilled climber could fall. Did he slip? Did the ice or snow give way? Did he get sick from the altitude? No one knows for sure. When he fell over 300 meters, 1,000 feet to his death, he was climbing alone because his climbing partner, Tenji Sherpa, couldn't keep up with his pace. The nearest people who saw him fall were over 1.6 kilometers away. The third person. In September 1975, British climbers Dougal Haston and Doug Scott had a scary experience on Mount Everest. After reaching the summit late in the day, they had to spend the night in the death zone, an area with very low oxygen. They dug a hole in the snow to stay in and huddled together, not sure if they would make it until morning. They ran out of oxygen, had no food, and their butane heater was almost empty. Things looked very bad for them. Then something strange happened. Both Haston and Scott felt like there was another person with them in the snow cave. This third person seemed to share body heat with them and gave them advice on how to stay warm and survive. This mysterious presence helped them make it through the night. Interestingly, other climbers on Everest have reported similar experiences. People like Peter Hillary, Lincoln Hall, and Reinhold Messner have all felt a strange presence helping them when they were in trouble on the mountain. This third person seems to appear when climbers are in desperate situations, offering comfort and guidance. No one knows what this presence really is. Some think it might be a hallucination caused by the extreme conditions and lack of oxygen. Others believe it could be something more supernatural. The 2017 deaths that never were on May 22, 2017. There was a strange and confusing event on Mount Everest. Reports came to Everest Base Camp saying that 4 dead bodies had been found in a tent at Camp 4, which is at 7,150 meters, 26,082 feet. People thought these climbers had died from altitude sickness. The bodies were discovered by a team that had been sent up to bring back the body of a Slovakian climber who had died 3 days earlier. At first, everyone assumed the 4 bodies were from climbers who had recently gone missing, but when they checked, no climbing agencies on the mountain reported any missing climbers. This created a lot of confusion, because no one knew who these 4 people could be. As news of the supposed tragedy spread around the world, the Nepalese tourism ministry stepped in. They suggested that the bodies might be from climbers who had been on the mountain the previous year. But this only made things more complicated. Even after checking the records from the previous year, there were no reports of missing climbers. In the end, the mystery of the 4 bodies at Camp 4 remains unsolved. Nobody knows who they were or how they ended up there. It's just another strange and unexplained event on Mount Everest, a mountain known for its many mysteries. Strange lights. Mount Everest is full of mysteries, and one of the strangest is the reports of unusual lights or orbs seen by some climbers. These sightings have been described in many ways, and different people have different ideas about what they could be. Some climbers have reported seeing bright, glowing lights in the sky or floating around the mountain. These lights are often seen at night and can look like small balls of light or larger, glowing areas. Sometimes the lights move slowly, and other times they seem to stay in one place. There are a few ideas about what these strange lights could be. One common explanation is that they might be a natural phenomenon, like reflections of moonlight on ice or snow. Another idea is that they could be caused by high-altitude conditions affecting the climber's vision. When people are at very high altitudes, they can sometimes experience hallucinations because of the lack of oxygen and extreme cold. These hallucinations can make them see things that aren't really there, like strange lights. Some people think the lights might be something supernatural, like spirits or otherworldly beings. This idea comes from local legends and stories that say the mountain is home to mysterious forces. These stories have been passed down for generations and add to the mountain's eerie reputation. Thomas Olsson's death. In 2006, Swedish climber Thomas Olsson attempted a daring feat on Mount Everest. He planned to ski down the mountain after reaching the summit. This is a very dangerous thing to do because of the steep slopes, ice, and extreme conditions. After successfully reaching the top, Olsson began his skiing descent. Unfortunately, things went terribly wrong. During the descent, Olsson fell and went missing. The conditions on Everest are very harsh, and finding someone in such a vast and dangerous area is incredibly difficult. Search teams were sent out to look for him, but they couldn't find him immediately. It wasn't until a month later that his body was discovered in a crevasse. A crevasse is a deep crack in the ice, and falling into one can be fatal. This tragic accident highlighted the extreme risks involved in climbing and skiing on Everest. Francis Arsentiev. In 1998, Francis Arsentiev achieved a remarkable feat by becoming the first American woman to reach the summit of Mount Everest without using bottled oxygen. This was a significant accomplishment because the air at such high altitudes has very little oxygen, making it extremely difficult to breathe and survive. However, the journey back down the mountain proved to be tragic for Francis. During her descent, she encountered serious problems. Without the extra oxygen, her body became extremely weak, and she struggled to move. Eventually, she could not continue and collapsed on the mountain. Her husband, Sergei Arsentiev, was also climbing with her. He tried to help her, but in the extreme conditions, it was impossible to save her. Tragically, Sergei also died while trying to get help for Francis. Francis's body remained on the mountain for nearly 10 years. Because of the difficult and dangerous conditions on Everest, it is often not possible to bring bodies down. Her body became a somber landmark on the route, a reminder of the dangers of high-altitude climbing. In 2007, a group of climbers found her and decided to give her a proper resting place. They moved her body and covered it respectfully, so she would no longer be exposed to the elements. The man who tried to climb Everest. In high heels, Mount Everest has always attracted many unique and colorful characters, but perhaps none as unusual as Maurice Wilson, an Englishman with a wild plan. In 1933, Wilson came up with an idea to climb Everest that was unlike any other. He wanted to fly a plane to the northern slopes of Everest, crash-land it, and then climb to the summit all by himself. Wilson trained for this in Britain by hiking and learning to fly a gypsy moth plane. He then spent the winter in Darjeeling, India, preparing for his climb by fasting and praying. He believed that these spiritual practices would give him the strength to reach the top of Everest. Realizing that crashing a plane on the mountain wasn't a good idea, Wilson decided to start his journey on foot. On May 22, 1934, he set off across the Rongbuk Glacier. However, he soon ran into trouble. He was blocked by a huge ice wall and had no proper climbing equipment or experience to get past it. His last diary entry was on May 30th, and sadly, he never made it back. His body was found the following year. There are some strange and unconfirmed details about Wilson's death. It was claimed that he was found dressed in women's lingerie, although this was never proven. In 1960, a Chinese team found a woman's high-heeled shoe near the area where Wilson died. It was later discovered that Wilson was a cross-dresser and had worked in a women's clothing store in New Zealand before becoming obsessed with climbing Everest. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to our channel for more content like this. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update.